Dear guests, dear colleagues, welcome to our conversation series. My name is Maria Stойчева and I'm the lead researcher, or the so-called principal investigator, in a research project called European Values and Social Challenges, funded by the National Recovery and Resilience Plan under the so-called Summit Project, which is an abbreviation under which it stands Sophia University, marking momentum for innovation and technological transfer. Welcome to the main hall of Sophia University. This research project aims to attract world-class scientists and researchers, and today's conversation will be about internationalization and academic competencies. When students move to a university in another country, they also move to another academic culture. This conversation will be about the academic intercultural competencies students need in order to make a success of mobility, and how we can describe and then help students to acquire such competencies. It is my distinct honor to be sitting here in the main hall of Sophia University with Professor Майкъл Байръм. Welcome, Professor Байръм.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Mike. I cannot think about anyone, quite literally, more relevant to talk with on this specific topic. I would say that few people have this academic standing and authority on the topic of intercultural competencies. And Michael, that's for the audience, is on top of this list. I'm very happy also to say, Michael, that you are research professor at our university, at Sophia University, St. Clement Ohridski, but also a professor emeritus of education at Durham University, England. You are influential theorist of foreign language education and intercultural education as well. And as a university, we are very proud for teaching so many languages. We have been calculating that our university, Sophia University, teaches more than 65 foreign languages. And I'm very happy that we start our conversation series with you. So welcome you again. So let me start this conversation with you with a question I would like to ask first. What made you think about or stimulated your interest in academic intercultural communicative competence, knowing that you have such a rich background in intercultural competencies?
In a sense, it's almost by chance, but of course, these things, I don't think there is really a chance or coincidence. But it was a friend and colleague of mine who works in Kazakhstan and teaches, she is English, and she teaches in an English medium university. And she has been noticing that her students, Kazakhstani students, some of whom have Kazakhstan language as their first language, others have Russian as their first language, but she's often noticed that they're having problems in really adapting to and making the most of being taught in that university, which is the very high status university. They are highly selected, but nonetheless, they have problems. Then at the same time as she wrote to me about that, there's someone from Taiwan who I met, and Taiwan has introduced or is introducing nationwide in higher education English as a medium of instruction. And they were going to have a conference about English as language as a medium of instruction, but he was convinced that it's not just a matter of English language as a medium of instruction, which is important. There are other matters and cultural matters or intercultural matters, and he knew that I was interested in that, so he asked me to give a lecture, and in order to give a lecture I had to start thinking about how to think more carefully about moving from the work I've done and the model I produced on intercultural communicative competence and how that might be adapted to the situation of students studying in a foreign language, in this case English. And Lynn Parmenter, my colleague, had already started doing that and sent me her first thoughts, and that's how it really took off.
You took off from that?
Yeah.
Okay, so then probably there's a difference you see between teaching English for academic purposes, and you have mentioned some example of people working in English speaking university outside England, and what do you think students need if they are going to study in another language, whether this is English or another?
Well, it's not, I mean, English or any language for academic purposes is a well-established tradition in English language teaching and needs to be pursued. But I think it's more than the matters of learning new vocabulary or even new grammar in some kind of academic discourse or some kind of academic level of language, because it's not just a matter of transferring or reformulating in a foreign language. All learning goes through language, and all learning, I mean, even people in the natural sciences and mathematics, as they're learning the discourse of the discipline. And the discourse of the discipline, of course, in mathematics is mathematics. But even in mathematics, you need to talk about mathematics from time to time, and that you need to learn the discourse of the discipline. And it's part of learning the discourse of the discipline which makes you a student of that discipline and begin to acquire the identity of it as a student of that discipline. And in other subjects, in other disciplines, history is the example that's often mentioned, that there is no history without language. The history is what is written and talked about by historians. And in that sense, the subject is the language is the subject. And it's a matter of learning not the superficial level, but learning and understanding the discourse and learning to talk the talk, if you like, of history in this case. So it's more than the merely academic practices of English as an academic, English for academic purposes. So
you mentioned about language and discourse, but what other aspects of intercultural competencies are relevant? Well,
we started with Lynn and Eric in Taiwan. They are talking about students in their own country switching to English, foreign language, English as the medium of instruction. But then there are those students, many, many more, international students as we call them, who go to another country, and it's not, then of course they also, in most cases, start learning or working in another language, a foreign language for them. But it's more than that, because now there are many other factors. They're in a new academic environment, in a new academic culture. The students in Taiwan are switching to English, but they're still being taught in Taiwan by Taiwanese professors and so on, still within that relationship that they have with their professors. If those same students went to the UK or to the USA or wherever, then they would find themselves in a different academic culture and not just learning in a new language. So there are other factors which are cultural factors or intercultural factors rather than just linguistic factors. So they have to begin to understand what the culture is that they're engaging with.
Okay, so that's very interesting. And can you a bit more elaborate on this distinction between they will learn in another culture, but also in another academic culture?
Yes. Yes, I mean, well, we mustn't forget that all international students, they actually live as well as study, right? So there's a dimension of what they need to be prepared for, if we can do that, which is preparing to live in another country. And that domestic, what we call domestic dimension of internationalization is underrated and not very much researched. But the point we're talking about now is when they're students as opposed to people living in the country in question, then that academic culture consists of different traditions, different ways of relating to your professors, different expectations on the part of your professors about what you will do as a student, how you learn as a student, and how you will then respond to the teaching. So there are different notions of teaching and learning, different notions of academic relationships, different notions of what academic work is. Group work, for example, is often a difficulty for some students who move from one tradition to another. They wonder, what is it? Why aren't we learning from the professor? I've heard that said by students in a British university. And only slowly do they sometimes begin to understand that learning from each other is as important as learning from a professor. If we could prepare them for that in some way and not have them simply learn from experience, if we could do some kind of preparation for them, then that might help them to be successful more quickly in adapting, or adapting is not the right word, but finding their way through a new academic culture.
I'm sure in your academic career, Mike, you have had many, many international students at various levels probably, or mostly at doctoral?
Mostly doctoral level.
Mostly doctoral.
Yeah, yeah.
So can you give us some examples of what we are talking about, how they adapt, if we don't want to use these words, how they
yeah, well, I suppose it is above all. Well, I mean, the problem is then that you're inviting me to move into stereotypes, right? Saying Chinese students this, or Arab students that. I've had a lot of students from the Middle East at one stage, and in more recent times, a lot of students from China and other parts of East Asia and Singapore and Hong Kong and so on. You have to, of course, there are cultural differences. That's what I'm talking about, and of course but there are also individual differences. I mean, they're individuals. So in that sense, you can't. I don't think you can give prescriptions, and you can't generalize about a group of students. But what you can perhaps do, and that's still to be seen, is help them to think about what might be different, and even what might be only slightly different. I had a lot of students from Hong Kong. They had been through the Hong Kong education system, which was largely influenced by British education. So those students more or less knew what they were coming to. But some still found it difficult to come to a British university and understand that they had to be more independent than they had been at home. And then, of course, there's the whole domestic side. And if as a supervisor, it's a question of whether what you feel your responsibilities are towards them as learners, but also towards them as people who are finding their way in a new environment, in a new culture in the broader sense, a new country. And sometimes that's as important as, so having a chat about their domestic circumstances and why they're missing their children at home and all that kind of thing is also part of helping people to adapt to a new academic culture, which they might be surprised at, that you take an interest in their domestic side. But I think that's as important. That's the way that I saw my role as a person dealing with international students.
So we are talking about specific aspects of intercultural competency for students, but also for supervisors.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, in some ways, the supervisors need to have academic intercultural competence just as much as the students. And maybe we should be more careful about preparing supervisors for working with international students as well.
How can they learn? I mean, do they have to change something in the way
Well, in
supervise?
some ways you can, if you look at a model of intercultural competence, then there are aspects of it which have to do with knowledge about where people come from, but that's not the most important. The most important is a sensitivity and a growing awareness of and an interest in how international students might be different from the, in my case, English students that a supervisor might have had. So it's a matter of sensitivity, training, if you like, or raising awareness. And that can be done, and indeed is done, but perhaps we can do it more systematically. And perhaps if Lynn and I can get a bit further with our ideas, then maybe we can be a bit more systematic in helping to plan introductory courses or preparatory courses for students before they leave their own country or at the moment that they arrive in the new country.
Okay, so we know that mobility has become a big issue, and we are observing an unprecedented level of mobility actually in Europe. You know about this initiative for creating European university alliances in Europe, joining universities from different countries, different parts of Europe in one alliance, integrating their bachelor, master, but also doctoral programs. And if I can just lead you into this area, so what is expected is that joint doctoral programs are created. Joint supervision will be from supervisors from different countries. So this probably even complicates the story more. So
it could
what
be,
do you think about
yes,
that? Yeah.
I mean, if you know that you're going to have a student from East Asia or the Middle East, then you expect there will be, well, if you've any sense, you will expect that there will be some adaptation, some change in what they are experiencing, and you as a supervisor should take that into consideration. If the student comes from another European country, we're all Europeans, right? So if you come from another European country, you perhaps think, well, okay, we're all Europeans. So the subtleties might be more difficult to handle. And we do know from our research, from your and my research, that there are variations within from one country to another about the traditions of what a supervisor is and does, and what is expected of a PhD student or candidate. But we know that, but we also know that there are always individual differences as well. So we have to try to encourage our supervisors to, yes, think about the academic culture and indeed the country culture from which somebody has come, but not to stereotype, and to be sure that they're thinking of these people as individuals as well as people from country X. And it's not easy.
And what about the interaction and the collaboration between two supervisors of one PhD student at this level?
Well, yeah. Well, that's
yeah.
difficult anyway, even between two supervisors in the same department, it can be. But it can also be a really productive relationship for supervisors and student. But there are advantages and disadvantages. Student gains two opinions, two views, and so on. But there might be conflict or differing views, and so there are pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages, even within one department or one discipline. If you then add to that somebody who is supervising from another country, maybe by Zoom or whatever these days, then that adds another dimension, another set of advantages, another set of problems. But one has to work those things through. And I think above all, it's a matter of awareness and raising awareness and talking about it. Talk is important. Discussion is important. Creating a sense of mutual understanding, creating a discourse of understanding. I mean, even the word supervision, if you translate that into different languages, then you get different connotations. But that's at the very superficial level. But much more about what are the practices of supervision and how that might vary and how we're going to combine the best of both worlds and avoid the problems of both worlds.
So we heard about your ongoing research and work on academic intercultural competencies. Yes, but can you share some other research ideas or research in process that you are involved in now?
What we're doing now, you and I are doing, yes. Well, it's still connected with doctoral studies. We've done our study of supervision as experienced by supervisors and supervisees. We've done our study of the experience of examining. The important word is experience. And now we're studying the experience of, for want of a better word, the defense or the final examination in different countries in Europe so far and maybe further afield later. The experience is important. That word is important, although it can also be a contested word. And the structure is important, and the purpose and function is important. And to bring that in connection with the plan for a network and a doctoral school across different universities, it's only one aspect, but if people have a better understanding of what the final exam is or what the defense is in other places, then that will help them to help their supervisees prepare. And it might also make them think again about what they are doing in their own practices. Whether, I've been interviewing examiners in Germany at the moment and been asking them, well, now that you've done your supervision, your examination, there's been this examination, you took part in the examination as an examiner, now looking back upon it, are you happy with this as a form of, as a practice? So far people say, oh yes, but I hope that when they read what is done in other places, they might think, well, maybe we could think again. Who knows? Yeah,
in our common research, we focus on experience, but you mentioned that this can be a contested term. Can you just say something about that? Yes.
Well, yes, but only at second hand. It came about through when I was in Germany on behalf of Sophia University, in Saarland University, and I was talking about this project or these various projects and doing it in German. And of course, then I had to speak about experience, and if you like, translate the word experience, for which there are two words in German, Erlebnis and Erfahrung. And we had this discussion with a colleague there, with someone who is her main foreign language is French rather than English. And we had this well, which is it? If we translate the title of the project, are we going to say Erfahrung or Erlebnis? Not easy to come to a conclusion. Then I started pursuing this a little bit further, and there's a really interesting semanticist, Spitzer, I can't remember her first name, an Australian, who has written about the semantics, including particularly this word experience, and how it is difficult to translate, or doesn't exist, or there are various translations. And she refers to the difficulty that, now I can't remember the name, but the person who translated Wittgenstein,
Yeah.
Elizabeth Anscombe?
Anscombe,
Yeah, that's right,
Elizabeth
you know
Anscombe.
her. Yeah, you knew her.
Yeah.
Who had that difficulty. Wittgenstein uses the word Erfahrung sometimes and Erlebnis in other times, and we only have the one word in English, experience. Out of all that, Spitzer says, well, you know, the English-speaking world doing their research talk about experience and empirical research and research into experience, but maybe we should think again about what exactly they're talking about. But that's a different matter for a different...
now can refer to the audience, I mean, to Nina. Do we have one word in Bulgarian or two words for experience? Two words.
Yeah.
You know now, what are they? Opit and преживяване.
Yeah.
That's for the audience. So we also have a similar issue. What do we put there? Opit or преживяване when we do the research?
Yes, but our research, your and my research, and
Yeah.
Nina has been involved, of course it's all happened basically in English.
Exactly.
And the book has been published by Routledge, or the books, an English language publisher. So the question has not arisen directly. It would have if we'd asked for a translation.
But I just wanted to to make this point for the
Yeah.
audience, for those of us who will be listening to this conversation. I think that was a fascinating conversation with you, Mike.
Well,
thank you
for
very much
inviting me.
For being with us and with me today here and with our audience. I think that can be the end of our formal conversation, but I will invite you to have an informal conversation with the people in our audience as well.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mike.
you.